Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I'm Ari Kaplan, an analyst that covers the legal industry, and I'm here with my great colleague, Caroline Hill.
Hi, Ari. Yes, I am Caroline Hill. I'm editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider. It's great to be here with you, Ari. We're on fire. We're recording for the second week in a row.
We're, well, listen, I think we got another listener, and so we want to really, we we want to satisfy the listeners, and so here we are. Today is going to be all about conferences and collaboration, and I guess alliteration. So we have CLOC coming up on Monday, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll be in Las Vegas for a few days, although the only thing people seem to recognize about my visits to these conferences is the fact that I host a very early morning run, and I'm looking forward to that on Tuesday and Wednesday. But I also, as you may remember, have just recently interviewed 30 heads of legal ops for a new report, and I'll be releasing an executive summary. And yeah, I'm excited about attending that event.
That's the perfect place for it, right? They're going to be fascinated. That's your audience, or one of your audiences.
Fascinated. They're just going to be blown away. But no, but there were a lot of really interesting takeaways just in terms of the size of the teams, what kind of resources, how they measure success, what they're doing in terms of innovation, not just generative AI, but certainly that was included as a discussion topic. Automation, empowering individuals to produce work on their own, self-service options, so the balance between providing technology and providing high touch service. So keeping the relationship, but also giving people the convenience of doing certain tasks on their own. Just a really interesting array of perspectives and issues that law departments are facing today.
What sort of size were the companies or legal teams that
Mostly
you?
large. I would say 75% or more were revenues of over $10 billion dollars and employees exceeding 10,000.
So
So,
really
and
large.
lots of obviously a, mostly concentrated, I would say at least a third concentrated in financial services and life sciences, and then an array of different groupings. I try to do a cross section. It's really just a sample size, but to pick people from as many industries as will speak to me, frankly.
And then in terms of some of the findings, so with generative AI, did you do a deep dive on who's doing what or where they're at, and what was sort of like the prevailing theme or more common?
Yes, I mean, my objective was to try to find out, is there fear of generative AI in the law department? How are you using it? How are you distinguishing AI from generative AI? Is it even AI? So that was another really interesting thing. Is the AI you're using having an ROI impact on your legal team? So I tried to ask questions that followed a pattern that would allow me to understand and allow them to understand, because I'm sharing this back with the community. I'm not just keeping it. And so I want them to understand that your peers are probably using some kind of AI. If they have any meaningful amount of e-discovery, they're probably using it for invoice review. But if it's generative AI, then it's built into Copilot. They're using it for legal research, but some of them are smartly deploying. And there were several examples, frankly, of people using Legalmation or iManage for routing or other tools, Neota Logic. Like there were discussions about certain tools in terms of advanced technology in their legal departments that are incorporating and leveraging AI. And so yeah, it was super interesting. I think people are very interested in this topic, although they don't give themselves, I think that there's still a way to go in terms of uh, understanding all the potential use cases, obviously.
I find it fascinating because of speaking to law firms who are being put under pressure by in-house teams to show how they're cutting costs by their own use of generative. I'm focusing specifically on generative AI. This is quite a new, or well, for the last few months been going on, where they say, right, what are you doing? What Gen AI are you using, and how are you passing on the benefit? Which I still think, I mean, this when I actually last spoke to CIOs about this, it was a while ago. This is a really fast moving area. I still think it's quite early doors for law firms to be able to sort of say, right, we're using it in this way, and this is the part, this is the cost savings to you. It'd be really fascinating to find out at what point we get to where in-house teams just go, right, you've had enough time. Like I think that they're putting pressure like they do. That's their job, particularly legal ops and or procurement. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting at the point where the in-house teams go, right, well, we're using it, and this is how we're doing it, and this is how we, like where they become more confident and more definitive about it.
Keeping with the conference theme, so 2 weeks after CLOC is the Association of Legal Administrators Conference, and that one will feature law firm leaders who are making decisions, executive directors, CEOs, administrators who are managing teams and offices. And I did a report that's coming out there as well. And one of the things that more sophisticated individuals, probably the CIO of a law firm who has experience with this, or someone that's particularly tech savvy in a law department, several have mentioned to me that data hygiene is a kind of less a discussed issue, and you need good, clean data in order to apply the technology. And that hopefully will be a focus. I'll certainly raise that at CLOC and at the ALA conference because I want people to recognize that there are things that you need to do in advance before some of this can be optimized. And in terms of the cost, I think it'll be interesting, although there's a real contradiction happening where there's a request to understand where is it happening and how are you using this, and if you are using it, it needs to be disclosed, and if you're disclosing it, we want to know what the risk factors are. And yes, we'd love to save money, but we don't want to save money and sacrifice risk. There's a really interesting balancing act that I think a lot of organizations are trying to deal with, but they're doing it in a genuine way. And I really believe that they're trying to do it collaboratively. The law departments are asking their firms, but they're also relying on them for information. So I don't think anybody is trying to hold anyone to a certain set of guidelines at this stage, but they're all trying to learn and progress together.
Yeah, I'm hosting a panel, different conference, but there's the British Legal Technology Forum on the 14th of May. And I'm hosting a generative AI panel there, where they've gone with the Western theme for the conference. And my panel is called Fistful of Dollars. I suggested to the panel that we all turn up wearing cowboy hats, but I don't think that they're going to go for my idea. They're probably going to fire me as the host, but anyway. But so we're talking about ROI. They are law firm people, and two of them in particular have been doing have lots of real life use cases of trialing Gen AI products. And we'll be talking about how you measure and demonstrate ROI. And so that's going to be really fascinating, because it's always been quite difficult in the past, particularly difficult in a fairly short period of time. But I do think that in the conversations that I'm having, particularly in, say, the billing timekeeping, so not maybe not timekeeping, but in the billing space, around generative AI, people are vendors are being much better at saying, and then I guess the law firms that are using that particular bit of software can then sort of measure it in that way. They're being better at helping to show the real value. There are certain areas where Gen AI lends itself to quite quickly and readily, where it seems to be easier to show ROI. So that's been kind of fun to sort of, it would be fun to be involved in that.
It's also going to be really interesting for people to share ideas about how they are actually calculating ROI. So if a lawyer saves, or a paralegal or a timekeeper saves an hour of time, you can actually quantify it because they would not have billed or have billed extra depending on where. But in other tasks, that also has come up in a lot of my research this year. Actually, in every single conversation, this sort of idea when I ask about ROI, or I mentioned how do you measure success, sometimes you're taking a leap and saying, we are estimating a savings of X, which we think will save us in dollars, Y, but if they're not, if there's not a actual amount that an individual is spending there, it becomes a little bit the clarity is lower, and so there's more there are more questions, and I think we're still in that stage of trying to understand exactly what those numbers look like.
Yeah, I mean, often it's anecdotal. Like, so I was having a conversation with a company yesterday that's using Gen AI to help compliance with outside council guidelines, and they have calculated it's a conversation. They have spoken to people who do the billing and worked out how much time they would spend going through their pre-bills, correcting them, etc., and then how long they have taken when using the software. In this particular case, they say it's half. So then they could kind of start to do some calculations around, well, that means you've saved X. So I mean, but that's that's really helpful. It's they're not saying it's 100% scientific, but obviously if it's a repeatable task, if it's something that fee earners do all the time, they've probably got a pretty good idea how long for each week, for example, or each month they spend on a task. And then if they use a bit of software, then they can start to measure, obviously over time you get a better idea about how much time does it take me now? And I think then you start to really be able to talk about some more meaningful figures, probably.
The thing that I think is going to be so much fun is that I'll be at this event in the US next week. You'll be at your event, right, in the UK. I'll be at another event in the US the following week. A couple weeks later, I'll be at Lexpo in Amsterdam. And so I hope that in 6 weeks or whenever we're both done, before the summer starts, we have this conversation about whether there's a difference between how leaders in different regions are handling this. Are their questions any different? The law firm report that I'm doing is specifically focused on mid-size law firms, and there are a number of interesting opportunities. Someone described generative AI as sort of like a superhero's cape for firms of certain sizes because it allows them to compete with much larger firms and gives clients the opportunity to consider them for projects they otherwise would not have because they felt like they did not have the scalability to handle it. And that's amazing. That's amazing because that reflects a total sea change in the profession, which I think is super cool. So
Yeah.
it'll be also interesting to hear from law firm leaders throughout continental Europe and the individuals that you're talking to in the UK and corporate leaders in various regions. And then of course over the summer I'll with any luck I'll have the privilege of interviewing general counsel to see what they're
Yeah.
doing around the world. And it just we're in this wonderful moment, aren't we, of change, but change in a way where everyone is trying to push in this same direction and in many ways lift each other up, right? The law firms are obviously focused on client service, and the clients are obviously focused on understanding what the law firms are doing so that they can figure out how to optimize that relationship. I just think it's really
You
fun.
always come up with the nicest ways of looking at things at it, Ari. Like you are like I'm always like, oh my goodness. Wow. So the in-house teams,
They
they're
want to
gonna
compete. They going to
compete, right?
billable
And they
hour, dead billable hour. Yeah. Well, I'll add one
you're
last thing
so
that the billable
swift.
hour point has come up a few times, and if people are constantly acknowledging this, they're like, "Oh, billable hours may be under threat," and then at the
Oh,
same time, they're like, "But you know what? It's been under threat for as long as I can remember, and
yeah.
it's still there. It's the metric of choice." So, anyway,
Everybody has like how
yes.
long before we're talking about the billable hour? Well, we said that 15 years ago and we're still kind of talking about it, but you never know. You never know. It might be
Mm,
something.
mm. I'm going to throw this out as we close here, Caroline, is to say
Yeah.
to any of our listeners, if they would like a postcard from Las Vegas, they should post a comment. Well, what could they possibly do? But I'm happy to send a postcard. Caroline, I'm happy to send you a postcard from Las Vegas and say, wish you were
Postcard.
here. Viva Las
Oh,
Vegas.
I
And
wish you.
I'll
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 send
be
you
I'll
one.
be, taking notes for our next chat at the Corporate
Yeah.
Legal Operations Consortium conference. So,
You
uh,
know what, we're gonna do the thing now, Ari. We're gonna do this on social media. Everyone's gonna have to they might
listen to our discussion, and we'll send you a
well, maybe
postcard.
they have to listen in order to find out what the challenge is. And they have to get to the end and then they can I'll send you a request for a postcard.
They're gonna
Brilliant.
be
This
like,
is
not worth it, not worth the postcard. Keep your postcard. Anyway, I'm Caroline. It's always a privilege for this episode of Charting Change in Legal. I'm Ari Kaplan, and I thank you very much.
thanks, Ari. Bye.